Hi, guys. Welcome back to the Deciding Factor podcast. I'm John.
And I'm Alton.
And do you know what the date is by chance?
It's Friday then.
Right? No, it's actually more important than that. So this is our 1 year anniversary of podcast.
What?
So you've been talking to me for at least a year now. And we've been talking to all of y'all out there. It has been fun. It has been interesting. And we've met some interesting people, but also some weird ones. Wouldn't you say?
True. It's true.
Overall, though, I would have to say it's been fun. And I think we have a lot to share with you. So today's show is actually what could you expect in your first year of podcasting if you even decide to do it. So guys, we're going to share with you our year in review because this is the deciding factor.
Everyday life issues broken down to help you build your own opinions on the issues that matter most. Coming to you from Austin, Texas, this is The Deciding Factor with your host, Alton Hill and John Herzog.
All right, Alton, we've reached it. We talked about it before we launched the podcast, and we never knew how long it would really go. In fact, I think you referred to it as a test run.
Yeah. Well, I think in the beginning, we both agreed that if we weren't ready to commit to a year of consistent podcasting, that for sure, nothing's going to come of it, right? Just like in anything, you got to be committed, at least for a little while, to see if it's going to do anything and see if anybody likes it. And so we've had about 3 whole downloads now. So I'm feeling like we're getting the momentum.
Yep. We're still fresh and new, but man, we've covered a lot, and we've had so many fun moments, both on air and off air. So let's look into that real quick. What would you label as your best off air experience? Kind of caught you off guard with that one, right?
Off air. Well, and we'll probably get into this a little bit more, but when we do these podcasts, we're meeting people, and sometimes they're, for one reason or another, they're just a really good fit for you in that time of your life or whatever it is, right? And you kind of hit it off, and so you actually have this connection that lasts after the podcast, right? I mean, full disclosure, sometimes we have people on the podcast and they log off and that's it, right? Like you don't really build a what's called like a longer term relationship. So one of those relationships that I think I'm still enjoying is with Jared Hanning. And so we get to chat quite a bit, and that's just been really, really fruitful for me. A lot of good dynamics there, and he's still like introducing me to more cool people. And so yeah, that I think that's been really good as far as like a guest off air. But then what was it? Was it last week? Where you and Barbara both were just crying because you were laughing so hard, and that was good. And I don't even remember if we were on air or off the air, but oh man, that was good to see y'all just crying because you were laughing so hard. Like I bet your abs were sore.
That was off air. So y'all were picking on me for Pinterest, and Barb just absolutely lost it. The problem is we were still trying to do our intro because we decided that it was better to do an intro after we see what the repercussions of the show are. And she couldn't pull it together. She was crying, laughing. And so if you find that episode, I'm not going to tell you, make you look.
Yeah.
she
Barbara's
looked like
makeup's all smeared.
yeah, she looks like she was crying and just worn out. I want to say it took 10 minutes before we finally were able to cut that intro.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
So off air experience, I'm going to go with Donnie Boving. He has been a lot of help for me. I mean, you talk about a guy that cares to help anyone and everyone. Donnie's it. I mean,
you talked a lot of trash to him on the podcast. I'm surprised he's being so helpful.
Oh, he still talks crap to me. Don't get me wrong, but it's good. So he was introduced by Net Peo, who was also on our show, right? So I did a virtual coffee with Donnie. Donnie had no clue who I was, and we started our conversation. First words out of his mouth, I'm not kidding you. How can I help you? Let me introduce you to somebody. Let me do something fantastic for you.
That's a good intro to the conversation.
What do you say to that? So he has actually been kind of a mentor to help guide us on certain things. He ended up being on the show, not because of that, but because of some of his knowledge, which you can go check out that podcast. So I would say we had a fantastic time with him prepping for that show. And I've since then been involved with him. So that would be mine. However, yeah,
cool.
So, however, we both didn't mention a special someone that kind of lingered around a little longer. And I'm talking about intern Barb. Now, it's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. So, as most of y'all have seen, we started out just Alton and John, and we did a homeschooling episode with Barb. Pure guest, and we thought it turned out great, had fun, and she was one of those fans that continued to reach out to us. And I think I speak for both of us, the chemistry and everything worked out pretty well, so we ended up having her on for more, and having that option C has been pretty good, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have a good dynamic and can talk a lot of trash, but Barbara is from a different place than us, right? So she's got different perspectives and she's looking at things differently based on her experiences and perspective. And I think that adds a lot of flavor to the show. And I think that, bringing her on has been really good and has aided us in how we're looking at things. And I think, the longer she's been on the show, the better we've got. And we have to say that she does a lot of things off air too, to help us with marketing and just, finding cool guests, right? Like she's definitely helped us land some of our favorite guests, which we have to say, like, our podcast would not be what it is had she not come and given us all the contribution and energy that she has. So hats off to you, Barbara. We love you. You're awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, what's funny though, is I want to say it was
my hat is literally off.
The first episode we had a guest on with Barb, though, it was probably the scariest part because right away she butted heads with the guest, and I don't know if you could see it on the video, but I was just like, oh no, what's going on? Turned out fantastic when I started looking at it. So I think that was the funniest part to having Barb. And then she flew into town, spent some time with us, and that was fantastic. I think she's hooked.
For sure.
So
yeah, hopefully we can have her out do some more podcasts in the studio instead of the Zoomy kind.
She's coming back soon. So
let me ask you, John. We talked about some of the off-air stuff. Let's talk about some of those favorite podcasts. I'm sure we have some listeners that are, haven't listened to us since we started a year ago. So let's share what are some of our favorites that we liked, that maybe if they hadn't heard, they could go check out.
So I'm going to go pretty much all the way back to the beginning, which was our first podcast of actually having video. Even though we had some hiccups, right? And Alton couldn't be seen, so all you got to see was my pretty face. We had a guest called Mike Watts, and the episode was titled, "What Does It Take to Be a Successful Entrepreneur?" That guy, I think, was phenomenal. I mean, he talked about so many aspects to starting up as an entrepreneur, and that mentality that it takes. And so initially it was like, man, this is my zone. That set me up when we were starting this podcast as, wow, this is going to be good. What about your first moment?
Yeah, he was a great guest, and I'm definitely echoing that. And he had such a good way of looking at entrepreneurship, and from someone who's been successful in a lot of different ways, and just the mindset that it takes. I think, it was great to talk to him, especially because he's from Texas. So by default, he's starting from pretty cool. I remember the one that really kind of inspired me, I guess, that even when we were done recording, I was like still sitting there going, oh man, this is cool. And that was our happiness guy. So what was the name of that one? Is Happiness the Cure to Everything?
Yeah, that was with Eddie.
Yeah, with Eddie. So an extremely powerful podcast, and about someone who has a story of, a lot of challenges, right? But again, back to decisions. He made the decision to be like, I'm just going to be happy. And we got a lot of good feedback from that one. Just people so really inspired by his story and his attitude, and his smile, so contagious. That's definitely one to check out. And I should probably go listen to that one again, honestly.
He was,
it was great though.
Yes, it was very positive. I even had some family members that are like, man, I listened to that 2 times at least, just because it was so good. So and then if you jump forward to where we've had a few episodes under our belt, the Jared Hanning one was pretty good, even though I didn't agree fully. I did like what he had to say on the show. But I will say this. It's probably our most popular episode, and I think we covered so much, good and bad, right? Was the Simone Gold. Having her on and talking about COVID and what was going on right then and there was fantastic. We got to ask her virtually anything we wanted, and she answered it. I even probed her on some of the hard questions that people asked me in prepping for that show.
Yeah.
And she answered it.
Yeah, she slayed it for sure. She was a great, she was definitely somebody that I felt like I could hang out with, that we just saw eye to eye in a lot of ways of just approaching things. As we go through the interview and she starts talking more about freedom, and just really sucked me in. I'm like, I like this girl, she's
that's your love language, constitutional rights.
Yeah, exactly, man. Exactly. So yeah, we totally have to mention that one. And then one more, John, that I think, man, I'm throwing pins at myself here, out of control. Here we go.
You got too twirly today.
I got too twirly. No such thing. Get out of here. The one that we did And I don't remember, there's most of the time we plan these podcasts, y'all. We schedule guests. We're thinking, what are trending topics? What do people need to know? And then sometimes we just say, hey, let's go record a podcast. Let's think of a topic that we want or whatever. And then we just kind of do it. And I don't remember where this fell under those categories, but the ones that we did about should I have kids or not? And for me, having 4 kids, John has like 14 kids. That one, I think, John, was your best podcast of the year. I think it was just so good and authentic. And I feel like if you're thinking about having kids or you have kids or just want to lean into that topic, that is one that I just feel like we really delivered, because that was just us, right? We didn't bring on some expert to tell us whether or not we should have kids or not, right? And obviously we're all biased on the subject and that we have children. But man, I just felt like that one was good. I felt like we all spoke from the heart. And so yeah, if having kids is on your mind, or somebody that is in that arena, I think that one is definitely worth a listen, and good memory for me.
Nice. I appreciate that.
Yeah, man.
So for those that are thinking about getting a podcast opened up and started, let's go over some of the
kombucha. You got to get kombucha if you're going to start a podcast. This is number one.
Nope.
John and I decided before the podcast. That's the answer.
So the realities of what you can expect during your first year. Let's start with a list of things that maybe we could have done better that were not so great our first year. So I guess 2 things stuck out to me, right? Is we could have marketed it better, right? We could have spent more time on Facebook and money for sure. Because that's what it all comes down to.
Yeah, you can spend as much money as you want.
I mean, you can get listens, you can get followers. The problem is how much money are you willing to spend to get there?
Show me the money, Jerry.
There's books out there that talk about it. And it's like, you can get 1 million followers with like $8,000. There's still a lot of effort to it. It's not just, hey, spend $8,000, you get it. So could we have marketed better? Absolutely. It would have taken more time, more effort, more money. The other thing would be a website. A website is a lot of work, straight up too much work, because there's keywords, there's SEO, there's pay-per-click. There is just even getting the pictures that are going to make it look professional. So having a website is going to be key. I know we didn't put any real effort or money into it. That could have changed things a lot. So I think those were the 2 downfalls that you, the listener, can learn from if you want to start a podcast.
Yeah, and I think too, it's good to set the stage of what level of podcast, right? I have some friends that have podcasts, and they just want to have a podcast. They don't have goals of doing that full time. They just I have one friend, he talks about comics and shoes. Like, that's his thing. He just wants to talk about it, and that's why he started it. But if you want to start something that is a real movement, has a niche, and you want to grow the following, there's definitely, you have to market it. And just recording the podcast and posting it to your own Facebook page is not going to get that done. So so definitely some things that we're looking at, reviewing year 1 and looking forward to year 2. One of the big things that I think it was Paluch, things that he said was, the quality of your guests. And so I may be stepping on some toes right here. But, you know, there's some people that may want to be on your podcast because they have an agenda and they just want to be marketing their podcast or their book or their business. And that's great, but that doesn't mean that they're great on your show. And John and I like to really put the screws to people, you know, and because if you're going to come on our show and you're going to stand for something and help us or you who are listening make a decision, it's our duty, John and I or Barbara, to ask the questions that you're thinking in your mind so that we're all empowered. I mean, you get to listen, but I'm sitting here doing the same thing that you are. You know, if somebody's trying to tell me my to-do list is dumb or, you know, whatever it is, right? Do I have a good mindset as an entrepreneur or whatever? You got to be prepared. And so the truth is we've had guests that have just, like, honestly, I feel like we've roughed them up and they just took it and so well and just really like almost wanted us to to rough them up because it was just going to make them look better, and they had confidence in what they said and they weren't offended. And you know, like I think about Dr. Gold, you know, we really tried to
I thought she was going to hang up the phone when I asked her about the girl from Houston.
yeah, and she
like, oh no,
just nailed it, man. Just nailed it. And so that's an area that John and I have definitely been looking at, is bringing quality guests to our podcast. And so that's something that you should expect from us in the coming months, is that we're being a lot harder on the people who are trying to be on a show, and not everyone's making it. Because we want to be sure that our show continues to get better, and we're raising the bar, and because that's going to end up, I mean, that's what we want, right? We want some good people who are comfortable when we're interrogating, I mean, discussing topics with them.
Be careful, don't give away our secret.
Oh man, put the spotlight in their face.
Yes, you know, to that I would add, don't be afraid if you have a podcast that does go south, that doesn't sound good when editing. You're going to have to be willing to say no and just cut it. Unfortunately, I believe we had 2 instances where we probably should have never aired those episodes, but I honestly wanted to get some feedback. You know, even if it was bad, I wanted it, and I got some bad feedback, but it's okay. I heard what I needed to hear, and I think I was expecting kind of that.
Yeah, and you know, we're always trying to learn too. That's really the whole purpose of the show in a lot of ways, right? Is not only I mean, it's our learning, but it's also the people who are getting to listen. And that's kind of how I think about our show, is that John and I are getting to grill somebody, or Barbara or whoever, or we're just grilling each other and arguing on our own. And then everyone else gets to listen in. So we're definitely have a vested interest in what we're talking about.
So what about the best parts about having a podcast our first year?
So for me, and I'm going to I should have started out apologizing to everyone whose name I'm going to forget. But if you've listened very long, you know that Alton doesn't remember anything.
Apparently our guests don't remember your name either, so it's okay.
Yeah, man, that was so funny. And I'm sure
Cletus.
Yeah, I'm sure that some people were like, oh man, he said it, he can't remember this guy's name. But to me, I'm just like cracking up on the inside, because to me it's totally funny. But as I was saying about the best things in our podcast, is one of the things that caught me off guard was the networking aspect. And um, we had some awesome human that came on and talked about how podcasting is like a great way to network. And it just like dawned on me like, oh man, this is totally the best way to network, because you can find somebody that is super awesome at what they do. And then having a podcast, y'all, is almost like having letters behind your name, or some degree or some qualification that just makes it easy for you to talk to whoever you want to talk to. Right. So like, there's no reason that Dr. Simone Gold should have talked to us ever. And yet we're like, yeah, we got this podcast. It's a really important podcast. You should come on and tell us your story. And she's like, podcast? Oh, okay, cool. And then we get to talk to her, meet her, see the real person. So that, to me, that's it. It's like that networking aspect, and how it's directed for me has been huge, because we've gotten to meet so many awesome people and so many connections. And when I say connections, I don't mean just that they're on my LinkedIn now or something. It's no, this is somebody that I could text, or I could call, or I could email, or is like following me on social media and engaging with me now. Like there's a legitimate connection, which adds so much value to life, especially this last year, where I believe so many people have felt disconnected.
Yeah. And that was Phil Paluch that talked to us about that.
Oh yeah, he was an awesome guy.
Man, that was a good podcast to listen to, especially if you want to have your own podcast or thinking about it. Check that one out. I can only reiterate the same thing you said. We have gained so much knowledge. We have gained so many more friends, networking, whatever you want to call it, enemies as well. But I'm okay with that. I'm okay. Yeah. I don't expect to win everybody's heart over. But that is probably the most important. We're not millionaires. I'm not
yet. I'm working on it. I don't know what John's doing. I'm working on it. That's something though that I hope that we can continue to develop, is that I was listening to Andy Frisella and Ed Milet. If you're not familiar with them, they both have podcasts, real big in the self-help, personal development space around business, except for their actual business owners. They're not cheerleaders.
Oh, so you're not an actual business owner, so what you're saying.
Well, especially Andy Frisella, he comes down really hard on these guys who are business coaches, but haven't made any money in business. Like their business is coaching and convincing you to spend money to hire them as a coach, as opposed to say, look, I made $100 million last year. I also have this mastermind group. If you want to be a member of, it's great. We can talk, we can connect, as opposed to like, hey, John, you want to make $1 million? Hire me to be your coach, and I'll help you get there. Well, how much money have you made in your business out then? Like $3. Okay. Are you really qualified? So anyway, so they were talking, and they're talking about your growth and your journey, developing yourself to be able to have business success. Like these guys, I think one of them mentioned this just the other day, that they had hired 75 people this year already, I think. So in 3 months, they'd hired 75 people. So that's like some insane numbers, insane growth. And Ed Milet said, you can't be ready to like make an impact and do a lot and not be controversial in some way, right? In other words, so you're going to hurt some people's feelings. And I think that, if I had to say another thing that I'm pretty excited about with our podcast, is that it's really kind of like the other thing that I wanted to say about our podcast is that it's really like revved up my engine as far as what we're doing here. You know, John, when you and I started, it was kind of like, well, what would be a cool podcast? What's needed? You know, what can we do that's going to be giving back? What do we have to give? Um, Maybe what's being underserved. And we kind of came up with this notion about making decisions and empowering people with knowledge and advice on topics and the idea, the concept of how to decide. And I thought that was a good idea in the beginning, but now I'm really like, this should be a movement in our nation, especially we've gone through an election, right? We've gone through crazy COVID and just all sorts of things that I honestly I didn't think I'd see in my life. And I look out there and I see so many sheep and just people with their blinders on and they don't think for themselves. And I think that for all of us who think for ourselves and have an open mind and want to have real discussions, that's kind of like the enemy, or people who don't think, right? And because those are the people who are manipulated, right?
Yeah.
To do crazy things. And anyway, so I'm just willing to state that I'm really on fire, and that more people should be thinking for themselves. And I'm really grateful to be a small part of that, and at least having a platform where there's a safe haven for someone to come and say, hey, I want to actually think. I know it kind of hurts my head sometimes, but there's a place for that.
Yeah. I think it's been really important for our kids because we've covered a lot of topics that I could honestly sit our kids down and say, listen to it. They might get bored with it for a second, but if they actually listen to what we talk about in some of these episodes, or most of them actually, you can learn something. And it'll also show you what our thoughts are and how we want them to look at things as well.
Yeah. And I think just another little note, and John and I had talked about this somewhat after we got started, is that we kind of started out looking for guests and looking for topics, and then hopefully finding a guest that could talk on that topic. And then we got to this point, we were like, well, what if there was more of like a curriculum, and it was a little more a little more strategy and order in it. It would take a lot more work on our part to get it done, but like sitting our kids down and letting them listen to it. If we ordered it and put it, in kind of like sections and chapters, there's definitely a flow through that. And maybe that's something we should do, John, sometime, is like, all right, we've had, 150 podcasts. Here's the actual right order to listen to them in, instead of, just randomly doing it. But anyway, sorry, squirrel.
No, it's good. We, so those are some of the things we've learned. Everyone always comes back to that big question though. How much money can you make? How much money do you make? How much did you make? Guys, that all varies on how much effort and money you're going to put into it. I mean, we had a lot of time that we could put into it, but this was not something that we were both willing to fully invest in. So, that puts limits on it. Could you be a millionaire in your first year of podcasting? Unless you're famous and already have a following, do not expect anything. Are you going to be one of those ones that you have such a phenomenal show that you're going to be recognized on YouTube for one episode? It's going to go viral. Good luck. That's still not going to make you a millionaire. Just not. I would say having Dr. Gold on during that particular time, during the crisis, right? That was phenomenal. Still didn't think anything would truly happen. It still hasn't gone viral yet. Is it great content? I absolutely would say so. I think you can learn absolutely a lot from it. Mm-hmm. So Don't do this for the money unless it's been a few years. Joe Rogan, 10 years before he got noticed, right? And he also had other things that he's been doing in television, UFC, things like that. So it's not like, he woke up one morning, said, I'm going to podcast, and boom, it happened.
Yeah, I think, well, let's, to bring up Joe Rogan and some of these guys that have a lot of good luck with their podcast. If you look, they're pretty successful in other areas as well. There are some, but most people, a successful podcast is not their first thing that they're successful at, right? If Seth Godin has a podcast, like he's an author, he's like critically thought about a lot of things. Joe Rogan has been an announcer and interviewed people and talked to people for forever, right? He's a comedian, Fear Factor, right? A long time ago, that's his space. And so you would expect that his podcast would do well. And not that you couldn't, but I think that one thing that I've learned in my own trying to chase success is that once you learn to be successful in one thing, it's easier for you to be successful in something else. And just that the work and the effort and the energy that it takes to be successful at something, right? Whereas if you've never done something really crazy or really been really successful, like how do you know the work and the money and the effort and the strings and the whatever you got to do to make it happen? So I think that we didn't really focus on like, oh, after a month, we need to get a sponsor, so anyway.
Yeah, we have not pushed for sponsors. We have not done a lot of that. I mean, we really haven't. We've been living life, having fun doing the podcast, trying to figure out really what is our niche, what do we want to do, what's going to really make it entertaining for us as well. Because
I think adding puns has been good. I feel like as time has gone on, we've added a lot more puns. I don't know if anybody else likes the puns, but I'm certainly having a lot more fun when I'm dropping puns and rhymes.
You haven't rhymed anything yet, but
puns, fun, it's close.
So the biggest takeaway on it, though, in what we were talking about with the money, though, is going back to the Phil Paluch, right? You might not make money off the podcast itself. Indirectly, though, the contacts you can make could actually help you or your business out. I think that's the big hidden secret. So go back, take a look at the Phil Paluch podcast. That one was, I think it was called is podcasting for everyone.
Yeah. And so, I think that's true for anything, right? Like maybe podcasting is the avenue, but the people in your life, there's the cliche, your network is your net worth, right? And that may be like financially true, but it's also on other levels, spiritually and whatever, everything else, so yeah, so that's definitely been good. Are we going to talk about the elephant in the room?
That I'm still bald? Or that you got a haircut?
Oh, I did get a haircut. Yeah, if you're just listening, I'm looking better than ever. So that's true. Hey, legit, I got my haircut today. Shout out to Flock of Fades. And the dude's like, hey, man, can I get your picture for the website? And I'm like, no one's ever asked to take. I mean, yeah, sure. So he was like, yeah, just turn around. Don't look at the camera. So I was so close. Anyway.
What's the elephant?
The elephant in the room is you're going to start a podcast. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? You got to pick the right partner, the right people to be on the show. There's definitely like some standalone podcasts, but I think just a partnership in general. I mean, marriages are 50%, right? And I think businesses, I talk to people often that they have great business partners and they're just in love with their business partners and it's all good. And then there's other people like, why do we do this? And y'all, John does so much work for this podcast. And so we got to honor John. He's a great partner. And if you're going to launch a podcast with a partner, think about the long haul, what it's going to be like to put up with their crap. Because if they're good, then it's good, right? But if not, you could really have a great podcast going and like hate your life, or maybe they're terrible for your podcast. So yeah, don't think about your partners or your, what do we call it when it's three?
The trifecta.
Partners, your triads, your whatevers.
It's a
I guess you could do a podcast by yourself. That would be hard though. You'd have to be dropping some seriously good content to do it by yourself.
No, I would have to say, it's good to have similar personalities to an extent, but I think what really makes us better is I get the business side and things like that, but if you want a deep, dark thought, or not a dark thought, but a deep thought, and really dig into it, don't choke over there, is what Alton brings to the table. If you listen to every deciding factor at the end, when we do our deciding factor, we always have to end with Alton, because he's got these deep thoughts on everything and really brings it home. I honestly think it goes back to you being a deacon. And I think that's what really adds to it, because you're more humble than me.
Is that true?
I would absolutely say so. So, so I guess I want to turn this to a different question though. Has it been worth it this year? So that's going to be your question. You ready for this?
Now it's time for our deciding factor.
That's the other thing. Make sure you have a voiceover for your podcast, because a bad voiceover can really screw things up.
Should have April Fool's with the voiceover, like got a girl to do it. And now it's time. No? Okay. I'm sorry. I ruined it. See, that's what I'm talking about, man. The partnership. See, you get a bad partner. He's just going to interrupt you. You're not going to be able to keep a straight face now for the most serious part of the podcast, and it all falls apart. Should have thought about that a year ago, man. John thought I was mature.
Hey, we're still up for negotiations on our new contract.
Not at all. Why, man, are y'all releasing me?
And
everybody needs a podcast host.
Barb and John.
Perfect.
So has it been worth it? If this crap keeps up, no, it hasn't been. But just kidding. And the show ends abruptly before the other episodes even air.
Record scratch.
So if it were to stop today, hopefully it doesn't. The connections, I keep going back to it. It's the connections. I have met so many cool people across the board. The other problem is I've learned a lot more than I would have.
That's the problem.
Yes, because it makes me more nerdier than I already am. I have learned so much about business, homeschooling, just a lot of different topics that I never would have learned in BNI, SCN, the news, whatever. Never would have learned it had we not started this podcast. So it's been fantastic for me. I didn't think I was going to get rich, so I'm not worried about that aspect. If it happens later on, great. Would I like to add more production to it? Would I make it more entertaining, that I think needs to start coming into play. But I accomplished so much. I think me and you, Alton, we built such a good friendship that we would have never had we not started this podcast. Even better, I love your family. Your family is fantastic. Every one of your daughters are phenomenal. Your wife is phenomenal. Not hitting on you, Heather.
She's hot.
Yeah. Note to everyone out there, if you are going to do a Dropbox folder for your co-host, make sure you don't put any inappropriate photos of your wife, because that might make it very awkward for your co-host.
Totally could. Totally could. Back to that partner consideration again.
But it's been fantastic. Me and you have become much more closer, and I will never regret this year or the time I've spent with you and your family. And Barb, you're not here, but as
we fired her.
Oh man.
Just kidding. She doesn't get paid. We can't fire
her. Barb, you as well. It's been great. I'm glad we met. I appreciate all the help you've done, all the crap talking we've done about Alton off the air and without him around, but it's been fantastic.
Do you think she'll actually listen to the show?
I don't think so. I think her friends will tell her, and then she'll be like, oh. Or I'll put a clip together. It'll be one of those 30-second clips, and it should be like, okay.
So the question is, was it worth it? I think that for me, a short answer, totally worth it. Definitely agree with you, John, that the connections that we've made together and with our guests have been really invaluable. I think when we first started this, I really maybe set the bar low, but I had a podcast before. Don't go listen to any of them because, man.
Click on the link below.
Yeah. No, there were definitely some good podcasts for where I was in that journey, that part of life. And I'm grateful for having done it. It was really good. But when we started this one, I told John, like, I learned so much by just producing a podcast that to me was invaluable. And so when we were starting this one, I'm like, we're going to meet so many awesome people and learn so many awesome things that just that alone to me makes it worth doing a podcast. If you like learning, but to me, like, learning is winning and growing and stretching yourself too, getting better, speaking and articulating what your idea is, right? I mean, we're doing the video stuff now, which I think is great, but still being able to communicate well on a podcast is not easy. And I was listening to Jim Rohn talk. If you don't know Jim Rohn, Google him. He's like incredible personal development speaker. And the way that he speaks is just incredible. And the way that he articulates and communicates things and uses metaphors to illustrate points and just really help you understand things is very impactful. And so when you're doing that on a podcast, you're going to be able to do that better in life. So when your kid asks you a question or you're arguing with your wife, you can explain your feelings better. And so I think that it's really helped us all. I think, John, you've gotten a lot better at podcasting over the year. I hope that I've gotten better. I think Barbara, although she hasn't been doing it the full year with us, I've watched her grow incredibly, over this. And so I think that you said it best in that how you said you wouldn't regret it. I think if anyone is out there, they're thinking about doing a podcast, do it. You're not going to regret it. It's going to impact your life positively. for sure. Even if some of that's like, oh, why does Alton talk so slow? That happened on my first podcast, right? I don't know if I said it on ours, but somebody's like, hey, Alton, how much weed did you smoke before the podcast? And I'm like, what? Dude, you talk so slow. And then what was it just the other day? Somebody said, why does Alton talk so slow? Who cares? Like I listen to some podcasts on 1.75x. So that's why that's there. Do a podcast. You won't regret it. I don't regret it. I'm grateful for this year. I think John and I have got some good things in the oven, cooking up some new ideas and new ways to do things moving forward. And I'm thankful for the momentum. And if you're still listening to this, I just ask that you tell your friends who are not sheep, who are not the ones who don't want to actually put in the effort to think about new ideas and new ways of looking at life, or solidifying the way that they look at life now. Share our podcast with them so that they can join the movement of not being told how to think and having the freedom to decide on their own, and to gain strength, right? To gain that muscle to be able to decide more accurately and more, maybe with more intuition than they ever had before, because I just believe that it's more important now than ever.
Yep. I don't know that I can. Oh, I will say this. Warning, if you do get a podcast started, do not talk to your dentist about having a podcast, because if they're doing anything in your mouth and you say that, they are liable to slip up and start asking you a whole bunch of questions. No, my dentist seriously started listening to us, and we've had so many conversations. The only problem is I feel sorry for all of his other clients whenever I show up into the office, because we spend a little extra time together.
It's a good thing for sure.
Yeah. So like Alton hinted, we do have some stuff coming. Make sure you stay tuned for that. We would love to hear some comments and feedback on our website or social media. We do have a new website coming.
Yeah, we do. It's almost done. It's slow bake. Another thing is, I think is a good time to ask, and maybe we can make a Facebook post about this too or something. We've covered a lot of topics. Had a lot of good people on the show. How many episodes have we done? Is this 52 or 50 or something? Like, we put one out every week for a year now. And that's a lot of different topics. So if you're interested in one, definitely feel free to jump on Facebook, Instagram, comment on the YouTube, wherever you're watching it, and give us a shout. And it can be weird and outlandish. We've had some far-reaching people out here, and or if you know someone, you read a good book that you really liked, that you maybe you don't have a podcast, but you want to hear the author talk, challenge accepted. Drop their name over to us, and we'll reach out, see if we can't get them on, and grill them for y'all.
Yeah, don't ask me to read the book though. Not doing it. I've got Alton.
You read a book,
Barb.
I think that was that we should have mentioned that. That's a big accomplishment for John. He actually read a book this year, first time in his life.
Oh, man, killing me, just killing me. Yeah, so stay tuned, guys. It's been a fun year. I appreciate you listening, staying tuned, sharing all your goofy comments, and thank you for all the sexual pictures that y'all have sent Barb. It's been thoroughly entertaining for us to get her responses on all of those.
And I'm going to keep talking slow, so get ready. Just save the speed for the motorcycle.
Just remember, you need a voice for the show and eye candy for the rest of the show. So make sure you pick that when you look for your co-host. Unfortunately for Alton, I've got both, so he's left out. But all right, so this is our 1 year. Alton, say bye.
Later.
This has been another episode of The Deciding Factor, giving you food for thought on real life issues. Be sure to click, like, and subscribe to this podcast, as well as all your big social media outlets, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Don't forget to check out our website at thedecidingfactorpodcast.com and give us comments and feedback. Until next time, stay safe and remember to keep an open mind.